Hello, magical forces. Analia Raven here at In the Mist by Analia. And in my introduction video, I talked a little bit about the Women's Theological Institute and the Reformed Congregation of the Goddess International and Crossroads. And in this video, I wanted to talk more about the Women's Theological Institute because in my last video, if you haven't seen it and you're new to my channel, I talked about the Reformed Congregation of the Goddess International and Crossroads, which the Reformed Congregation of the Goddess Crossroads is the base for Indianapolis, Indiana, and the base for Reformed Congregation of the Goddess International is in Wisconsin. And so I wanted to, in this video, which will probably be broken up into part 1 or part 2, maybe even part 3, because this topic, the Women's Theological Institute, is kind of a big topic. And there's a lot to cover and a lot to give you guys as backstory. So let's just jump right into it. I will start with what manuals you will be getting if in the Women's Theological Institute. And it's a 3-cycle program. And this is manual 1, and this has all of your core activities in here that you have to subscribe to. And then manual 2 is this pink one, and this has all of your elective activities that you're going to have to finish. And so cycle 1, sorry, I have my notes here so I don't forget anything that I need to tell you guys. So cycle 1 is going to be basically a year at the minimum that you have to be in cycle 1. And you're going to be in the to know portion. So you're not going to be practicing anything. You're not going to be leading anything. You're just going to gather information. You're just gathering a lot of information. And your core classes that you're going to have to take is number 1 is goddesses, and with each cycle you have to pick 10 goddesses. In my cycle 1, in my cycle 1, I picked the 10 goddesses that I picked was the Morrigan, and which she is the goddess of war. Mecca, Navon, and Anu is believed to be her names in some traditions. She's also believed to be derived from the Tuatha De Danann. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but according to what I've researched, that's what some traditions subscribe her to. And then I also picked Morgan Le Fay, and there's kind of like some sort of argument. Is she the Lady of the Lake, or is she the Lady of the Fairies, or is she both? In my experiences, I think that she is the Lady of the Fairies and Lady of the Lake. And I also kind of group her with Queen Mab, the fairy queen of the Unseelie court, and that's what I found out about her. And I also worked with Hel, Loki's daughter, and ruler of the underworld in the Viking tradition, in the Viking mythology. She was a very interesting goddess to work with because she has these two faces, one being a beautiful woman and one being, decaying and dying. And her energy was just really, it's hard to explain. But I'll get into all the personal experiences with each goddess in a different video. And then I worked with Caradwyn. I called her the cauldron goddess. She's always depicted with a cauldron. She was the one that was making this brew in a cauldron underneath the earth. And I believe the poet Tennyson, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Tennyson was the one that burnt his finger on the brew and put his finger in his mouth, and he took the brew that was intended for her hideous son, because her hideous son had nothing but, and she was going to give him all the knowledge and magic. And but Taliesin, I'm sorry if I'm butchering that name, had taken it, and so there was a big huge chase of Caradwyn turning into different creatures and chasing him about, and that's how she became, and Taliesin eventually became, her son, because she ate him. And it was this whole funny I thought it was pretty humorous. And then I chose Hecate because she's a very well-known goddess, a maiden mother crone aspect of the goddess, and so I chose her. and Persephone. And I don't know why I chose Persephone. I just thought maybe she was interesting because of her descent into the underworld as Hades' queen. And I didn't take it as Hades took her and made her his queen, but more or less as because back in those days when she ate the pomegranate seed, she knew what she was getting into. And so I just think it was a choice. So I took that as into my interpretation of Persephone's descent as she chose to go down and be queen of the underworld. And Medusa, she's one of the Gorgons. For me, she represents strong femininity because of her tragic story of being raped. And then she begged a goddess for help and received nothing but, she's going to be transformed into this hideous monster. But, and also a goddess of tragedy because of what happened to her. And so I view her as a very strong goddess. Um, I know she's not really a goddess per se in the myths, but to me she is because of what she's been through and how she survived and how she worked with what she got. So, and then I chose Sekhmet because when I was younger, she was the goddess that I worked with when I first started getting into witchcraft and paganism. I know, right? Sekhmet being the first. And she's basically the goddess of protection, war. To me, she represents this primal sex and fiery rays of the desert sun. And then I chose Scotty, which she represents skiing, bow hunting, and mountains. Um, I chose her because we worked with her in a ritual one time during the winter solstice, and I don't know, I just thought she was a very interesting goddess to research a little bit about. And then the last one I chose was Crone Mother, which encompasses all of the crones. Um, I've pictured her as, being very full of wisdom and magic and the cunning woman. That not the stereotypical crone, but that crone that you see. And sorry, the lighting is kind of weird right now. It's just like I said, the overcast and the sun's kind of tiny bit peeping through. So if that's bothering you, I'm sorry. And so that was the goddesses. And in psychic skills, number two, your second core course that you're going to have to take is psychic skills. And when I first got into the WTI program, I thought I had all of this stuff down, but no. You have to really be creative in how you go about doing this because even because when I was practicing as a solitary for 8 years before going into WTI, I really had to find other things that I wouldn't have necessarily studied if it wasn't for WTI. And so, psychic skills, I took, I watched 9 hours of documentation on the practice of spirit communication. And I did some research on the Ouija board and automatic writing. And I don't know if I'm getting better at trusting what the Ouija board says because a lot of times recently a lot of things have become true. And because before I didn't put a lot of stock into it because I thought it was just what is that called, motion. I thought people were moving the pointer, or I thought I was moving it, or just something like that. But I don't know, a lot of things that I found out was pretty legit. So I'm gonna be more open-minded when it comes to the Ouija board or Ouija. I don't know. I always pronounce it funny, so I'm sorry if that bothers you. Or maybe I'm not. I'll pronounce it how I want to. No, just kidding. But anyway, and then for magic, this can mean anything. This can mean like studying ceremonial magic, studying hedge witchery, just any type of magic. What I usually study before I enter WTI, which I try to stay away from, was just the run of the mill magic, spell crafting, and not what I did. I'm going to pause this because